Welcome everybody to the Safe-Ask Culture Meetup's Tuesday Tools Zoom call. We have a few of you today, so it's nice. We're going to get some personalized coaching today. I'm just going to go over the ground rules real quick. We go over these every time, so I'm just going to run through them. We're recording. The whole point of this is to put it as a podcast or on YouTube or something like that, so people who missed the meeting can get the same information. So check your anonymity. Make sure your name is something you're willing to possibly be recorded. If you don't want your face recorded, just turn your camera off. It's on you, so you're responsible. Feel free to take screenshots. This material is not a secret. Everything is optional. You can say pass on anything. If I ask you to have a chat with me or I maybe put you in the hot seat or something like that, you don't have to do anything. You can say no thank you. That's part of good communication. I just want to give a trigger warning when we talk about healthy, unhealthy communication and abusive behaviors. It just happens. Unhealthy communication very quickly turns into abusive behaviors. So just a trigger warning there that we might talk about some things that could possibly trigger you. And if so, take some space. You do you. Handle yourself however you need to be, your emotions however that you need to, and we trust you on that. At the same time, the whole point of this course is to get better at handling those things. Be respectful to yourself and others. And what I mean by that is everybody's in a different place on the journey, including you. Be kind to yourself. Watch your negative self-talk. I might call out your negative self-talk here or there if we end up on the hot seat or something like that. But I just want to be clear that this is not about giving each other advice or anything like that. We respect where everybody is. We respect that they're being forthcoming and vulnerable. We don't judge them. Sometimes it's easy to see where other people are on their path and you want to help them or you want to say something, but they're not ready to receive. So don't give unsolicited advice. It's actually can be counterproductive. And that's respect everyone's time. And that's if we have a chat, like respect time limits of like a quick response being about 10 seconds, a deeper response being about a minute. We don't want any monologues or anything like that. Everybody's here for the same reason. So we want to give everyone a chance to talk if we can. And we don't want to derail with tangents. And the last thing I want to remind everybody is that I'm not a licensed professional. I am not a therapist or a PhD or anything like that. I'm a communications coach. And if you have trauma, like real trauma you're trying to work through, this is not the place. This is the place to learn how to communicate better so you can handle all your communications and all your miscommunications better. If you have trauma to work through, I highly encourage you get a licensed therapist to do that because I am not one and that is not what we're doing here today. In fact, that is a topic that we are going to talk about halfway through the presentation, is the difference between me and a therapist friend of mine. So, okay, today we're still in part one, which is getting clear with ourselves, and we're going to talk about how emotions are real. And before people tune me out, I just want you to know that I used to tune this out. I used to think, oh, emotions are real, duh. Or emotions are real, but they're not that big of a deal. Turns out I was intellectualizing away my emotions, which is a pretty fancy way to say I was ignoring them and making it okay to ignore them. So I want to take a moment to walk through emotions, how they're real and how they affect us today. Before we start, I'm going to ask you, on a scale from 1 to 10, how emotional are you right now in this moment? On a scale from 1 to 10, how emotional are you right now in this moment? Type that number into the chat or the comments if you're watching the video, and think about that for a second. 10, of course, being the biggest and 1 being the smallest. Okay, I've got some numbers here. I've got K. K is a 4. John is a 7. Okay. I'm personally right now, I'm about a 1 or a 2. I'm not normally with like presentations and things like that. People can have anxiety or stuff like that, but I've done a lot of public speaking in my day. I've taken a lot of like speak from stage workshops and classes and intensives and all that sort of stuff. So My emotions right now are about a 1 or a 2. I'm pretty calm, but at the same time, I've got just enough emotion to make sure that I hit all my points and I don't go on a tangent. Okay, so raise your hand if you are above a 2. If your emotions were above a 2, raise your hand. Okay, just be aware. That's all. Raise your hand if your emotions were above a 5. We're just being aware. Raise your hand if your emotions are above an 8. How about if your emotions are at a 10? I would imagine that if your emotions are at a 10, you're probably not here. You probably couldn't make it to this call. You probably couldn't pay attention. You probably couldn't keep track of time. And if you are here and you're a 10, I'm imagining that you're going to have a hard time receiving the majority of the content. So, and we'll get into why I'm saying that in a second here. Uh, Raise your hand if you've ever been so in love, that you started to see the world through rose-colored glasses. So, rose-colored glasses. Have you ever experienced that? That rosy look, rosy outlook everywhere you go? How about the opposite of that? Raise your hand if you've ever been angry and did things that you regretted. Let's say you were seeing red. Raise your hand if you've ever felt like you've seen red. You were just kind of weren't fully in control. Everything was frustrating. Didn't matter what it was. It was making your day worse. Let's try that one more time. Raise your hand if you've ever been really sad or even depressed and just everything in the world just looked dark and just everything was blah. It didn't matter what people said or did, where you were. You were just in a sad mood and everything was just dark. That's just pretty real, right? That all those things, I would imagine all of you have experienced all those things at one point or another. So it should be obvious the emotions are real, yet we ignore them. It's kind of interesting. We actually ignore them. We try to pretend that emotions affect other people, but not us, which is kind of funny. So try this. Think back to last week and think of an argument or a misunderstanding from last week. And I want you to think about your emotional level and put it in the chat. I want to know where your emotions were at last week for this specific misunderstanding and where they're at today. Give that a quick chat there. And I'm not looking for the whole thing. I'm just looking for a number and then another number. Okay, we've got K, who is at a 7 and is now at a 3. So your emotions have gone down a week later. We have John, who says he's at a 5 and he's now at a 4. So your emotions went down just a little bit, but you're still pretty emotional about that, it sounds like. So maybe it wasn't resolved or something like that. But we can see like our emotions on a specific topic change. And they're more likely to go down when we get some distance from the actual event, when we're not all caught up in it, or literally all caught up in our emotions. So, when was the last time you stopped to acknowledge your emotions? Like that's what we're doing right now. We are taking a moment to check in with ourselves and acknowledge our emotions. When we say, oh, I think my emotions right now, oh, they're a 4, or my emotions last week were a 7. We're acknowledging our emotions and we're taking time to feel them for a second. Oh, it feels like a 7. I wish we did this more. I wish this was more socially acceptable to just take a moment to see where you're at. Before we go too much further into today's topic, I'm going to take a really quick summary run through last week's topic because it builds. So last week, we talked about an overview of what a healthy conversation looks like. We talked about what is the word communication, what is that? Healthy communication versus unhealthy communication versus abusive communication. We talked about tools of awareness and choice. And I'm just going to give a quick recap on each of those topics, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Overview of a healthy conversation is one, we get clear with ourselves, we get our head right. This is kind of what we're doing today. It involves emotions. Two, we create a safe space to have a talk. Three, we hold space for each other. And four, we agree to something or nothing. And all those things together, that's what I call Safe-Ask culture. And Safe-Ask culture is actually going to be a whole topic to itself at some point in the future. But high level, you want to have a healthy conversation, get your head right, find a good space to talk, a safe space, hold space for each other, and then agree to whatever comes up. Sounds easy, right? But I understand that there's a lot involved in that. So just to recap on communication, communication is everything we say and do consciously and unconsciously. That's all communication. Communication is also everything that they say or do consciously or unconsciously. I mean, like, this is why reading people's micro expressions and body language is a thing, because micro expressions and body language are a form of communication. Communication is also everything we receive from the other person, consciously or unconsciously. So just because their communication is in their body language doesn't mean we received it. Also, their body language might say a certain thing from their point of view, and we might receive it as something totally different. Same thing with words. They may say something that they think is no big deal, and we receive it as a big deal. So everything we receive from the other person, consciously or unconsciously, is communication. Odds are we are not receiving them correctly. That's that's a pretty high chances we're not receiving them correctly or completely, which is why communication is so hard. Healthy versus unhealthy versus abusive. Healthy communication strengthens a relationship. By the end of the communication, this made us stronger. Unhealthy communication is going to damage a relationship. Where it crosses the line to abuse, abusive communication attempts to damage the other person to get our way and also damages the relationship. So abuse takes that extra step of trying to hurt somebody or punish somebody. And just say it out loud, that is absolutely wrong and unacceptable. And you should not accept that from other people, and you shouldn't be doing that. The tools we talked about last time, we got clear on what do we want from our communication. We want healthy communication. So we want to strengthen our relationships. That's our goal here. We're learning all this communication stuff and all these tools because we want to strengthen our relationships. We realized we have a choice on how we communicate. Once we notice that there's healthy versus unhealthy versus abusive, then we can choose healthy. And we can choose to give healthy communication, and we can choose to only receive healthy communication. So with all that, we are now aware of our intentions. That was the kind of the overall point of the last meeting, was getting aware of our intentions behind our communication and what they could be, what they should, well, I don't want to say should, I don't want to should on people, but what they could be if you want. So remember this from earlier, the overview of a conversation. Today, we're talking about getting clear with ourselves. So we're still in step one, and this is going to be the topic of October. Why? Well, it's because emotions are real, as we already talked, but I'm going to dig a little deeper into what that means. So I love this quote. Um, Although many of us may think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, biologically, we are feeling creatures that think. And this Jill Taylor, PhD. She wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. She also did a TED Talk, My Stroke of Insight. I highly recommend it. I'll see if I can find a link and drop it in the group. But My Stroke of Insight, the TED Talk, if you search on that, you'll find her. She's amazing. She is a brain scientist. And one morning she woke up and she was having a stroke. And that meant her brain was just doing weird things. Things were shutting down, things were coming back online. And as it was happening, she was aware of it. And she thought, wow, this is really cool. Like, who better to have an awareness of what a stroke feels like than a brain scientist? But at the same time, she was panicking. I need to get help. And it brought her down a whole path. Her research for years now has been all around this sort of how does your brain work and how do your emotions work, and how her feelings were just limitless while she was having a stroke. And then she would get sucked back into the moment and realize, oh, I'm trying to dial 911. And she's explored that. And her book, um, My Stroke of Insight, was incredible at figuring that out. Um, so, yeah, pardon. Um, so biologically, we are feeling creatures that think, not the other way around. We think first, and that's really important. That's really important. Uh, Sometimes people try to logic their way out of their feelings, and that means you're not feeling them. And if you're having some kind of an interaction with somebody and they're emotional and you're not, you can't just tell them, quit being emotional or think logically with me, because they're feeling. When you're feeling, your logical processes get shut down. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second. So when we're feeling, our bodies change. Our pulse speeds up. That's just natural. If you think about the last time you were freaked out, if you think about that misunderstanding from last week, your pulse was probably going. There might have been anxiety in there, there might have been fear, there might have been, anger, but your pulse picks up. And when your pulse picks up, our brain, the blood flowing through it changes. And this is part of what was from that book I was just talking about. The front of our brain, where we do all of our logical thinking, is what makes us human. It's what we think we're so good at. When our pulse picks up, our brain blood flow doesn't go there. It totally bypasses it. When we drop into fight or flight, we're not thinking. We're just reacting. That's how our species stayed alive. But it's really important to realize that we are wired with fight or flight. And when our emotions get suddenly they're up, suddenly our pulse is going, that whole thinking thing just turns off. It doesn't even get the blood flow. And now we're already dashing because our emotions just took over. And it's really important to realize that. The more our emotions go up, the more our thinking kind of just drops. Our logical processes just aren't there. So when we are feeling, our body changes. We think differently or not at all. And that is very real. Okay. When people try to uh, push off emotions like they're no big deal, they are a big deal. If you're thinking, your body's doing things, and that is real. And when we were talking about the rose-colored glasses, seeing red, depression, fear, all those things are real. And when you're experiencing those emotions, they tint your whole view of the world. Everything is now that emotion. And if we are feeling and our thinking is flawed, and then we are acting accordingly, what do you think is going to happen? We're probably going to make a big mess. Our emotions are now acting in the world and changing the world. And again, that makes emotions very real. So I just want to make sure everyone's giving the respect to their own emotions and other people's emotions, because they're real. Our logical process shuts down, and then we start to react. And who knows what kind of a mess is going to get created. So it's no wonder that arguments go off the rails, completely off the rails. If we're not thinking, we're feeling. We're not listening, we're feeling. We're so busy with what's going on in here that we can't hear the other person. You ever had that? Like someone is yelling at you and you don't even hear the words they're saying because you're yelling back. That's how emotions can take over. And it should be respected. So I love this example. This happened to me fairly recently. I had a chat with a relationship coach. I know other people in my space and around my space. So coaches sometimes get together, we share opportunities, we pass along clients. It's like, well, this person is not good for my program. I think they're perfect for your program. That sort of thing. We get people connected to the right coach. And also we get together and just skill share. How is it that you run a call? That sort of stuff. So I was having a call with another coach, and we were talking about their style of working through things and my style of working through things. And she's been reading my book, and she personally, she said she loves it, and she's sending it to her around her office. Um, but we came up with some interesting things. Um, we focus on different sides of a misunderstanding. So they focus on fixing the last issue. They are a relationship coach. Two people come to them with an issue and they're button heads. And her job is to help them get through that issue. Like they're paying her to help us now. So she helps them get through that issue. And one of the tools that she has is she talks them through it being okay to be emotional. It's okay to yell. It's okay to cry. We're gonna work through this together. And they have a third party mediator, which is her, the coach, the counselor. And that is one way to handle a misunderstanding. Okay. It's like misunderstanding started here over time, and now we're here, and it's big. And she's just focusing on the misunderstanding, even though there's a lot of emotion involved. And they will get it fixed, or they will get to the bottom of it. And then what happens is kind of a, well, see you next week, right? I'll see you when the next big thing comes up. And I want to be clear that I'm not in any way knocking or putting down this coach I'm talking about. They are wonderful, wonderful. And the tools they have are incredible. But also, the approach that people are coming to her and asking for is fix this for us today. And if she helps them, which she does, I mean, that's her job, she's actually disempowering them. She's teaching them that I can help you work through these things. So come back when you need to work through something else. So that's kind of disempowering. There's going to be another something else, right? Next week, there's going to be another thing that they have to work through. My style of coaching, I'm not a relationship coach. Okay. I'm a communications coach. And the difference there is that I work on fixing the communication. She she focuses on fixing the issue. Communication second. She will handle the communication. Don't worry about it. Let's fix this issue. I'm sure along the way, she is sharing tools. Whether or not the couple hears these tools, no, that's a case by case basis. For me, I'm focusing on communication. I'm not focusing on the issue. So if someone did come to me with, oh, my marriage is about to end, can you help us? I'm going to tell them I'm not focusing on your issue. I will teach you how to communicate, and I will teach you how to focus on your own issues. And the difference there is that I'm teaching them how to fix something without yelling. That's really the first step in this quest, this journey, is how do you fix something without yelling? And to do that, you can't start on the big relationship ending issues. Instead, you have to start with the little things that have built up over time. Little things like where you squeeze the toothpaste and who does the dishes and who leaves dishes where, and just the little things that we've been letting slide, right? The little things that have been nagging at us, that maybe we nag at each other. Those are the things that we focus on first. When we're fixing our communication, we start there because clearly there's a conversation that was never finished around the toothpaste and or the dishes. So rather than talk about the big thing that it like we're button heads on right now that is ended it, that it'll make or break our relationship, let's start with something small. Let's learn some tools, practice on those small things where it's not a big deal. Like, okay, yes, but you squeeze toothpaste from the center and I squeeze from the end, and it's frustrating. But you know what? We've lived with this for who knows how long. What if we had to talk about it and see if we can solve this? Practice some of our new tools and actually solve something. And if you work on a lot of little issues, eventually you'll run out. You'll get good at talking through things. You'll get good at talking through little things. Then you can start talking through slightly bigger things. One day, you'll get to the big things in your relationship. But odds are it'll happen before you even realize it. your communication will start to get so good that you're in a safe space with each other, and it starts to be okay to just bring things up. And that's a big part of communication. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells and you can't just bring things up, or you can't say no, it's not the issue, it's your communication. So let's focus on the communication. Let's heal that. And the issues tend to start healing themselves. So, and I just touched on this. Why do we do this? We use all these little issues, like almost like a batting cage for a baseball player. You can take so many swings in a batting cage and mess up, and it's no big deal. It's just not a big deal. Just swing again. And if you have to step back from the plate for a second, readjust yourself, let a ball go by, no big deal. Get back in there, get your head right, go for it again. By teaching people how to have better communication, how to solve the little problems and build up to solving bigger problems, we're empowering them. And that's what I like to focus on. Again, I want to make sure very clear that my friend who's a relationship coach, all the therapists out there, their tools are on the other end of this long list of communication going wrong. Your tools are very important. The idea of coming in and having someone to mediate and talk through a really big issue with is very valuable. So please value those people for exactly that. They're wonderful. Also, what if we can go back to the beginning and start cleaning up our communication for our whole life? That's what I'd like to focus on. So, how about you? How about your world? I'd like you to type into the chat that big thorn that's in your relationship, whichever relationship just jumped into your mind, first one. Think of that big thorn in that relationship and how it's just ruining everything and you wish you could solve it. And then I want you to think of two really tiny thorns in that same relationship. Things like the toothpaste. Things like I sometimes I wish I could suggest where to go to dinner and be heard. Like little things like that. Take a moment and put that in the chat now, please. I'll give you maybe 15 more seconds. Okay, I'm not going to read any of these. I'm just going to move on. Those are for you. Okay, so I wanted to give you a chance to recognize this is a big thorn in my relationship and I'm not talking about it. I wanted you to recognize that these are little thorns in my relationship and I'm not talking about those either, or we haven't solved them, or I try to talk about them and it doesn't work. Whatever the communication breakdown is, it's happening. I want you to recognize it. Okay, so next, how do we not yell? How do we talk through an emotional misunderstanding? My friend, the coach, got really good at that, right? My relationship coach friend got really good at helping people talk through with yelling, with big emotions. But they have to keep coming back to her to do that. She's a mediator, right? She's got, and I know that for her, there's a whole process for her too. Like she has to get her head right to help them and hold space for them. And then afterwards, she's got to step out and like put it all down. So how do we not yell? How do we talk through an emotional misunderstanding? And this is going to be, it's going to sound simple, but I'll get into it. We don't. Okay. This is the first thing I want you to realize. You don't have to. When you're emotional, you can just not. You're allowed to do that. And we call that a timeout. And I personally like to put in the words, I love you. So, for example, if you're having a big emotional moment, you're in the middle of a crisis and you're with your partner and you just, you're about to have this big argument that you're not hearing each other, whatever, stop, call a timeout, just like this. Okay. Put a pause on the conversation, put a pin in it, if you will, and say, timeout, I love you. We're arguing. We're yelling. What are we doing? If we're yelling, if our emotions are high, our logical stuff's not working. If we're yelling, we're not going to hear each other. If we're yelling, we're not going to solve anything. We're going to make this worse. So timeout. Timeout. The hand signal is really important. I'll get into that in a second. I also want to clarify, because I had someone bring this up. They were offended by my timeout. So I want you to know what a timeout is and is not. A timeout is not go stand in the corner. Okay. When I use the word timeout, I am not talking about what we do with little kids who are misbehaving, who need to calm down or something like that. It is not that kind of a timeout. It is not ever used to punish someone. It is used to bring awareness to our situation and go, oh, this is where we are. Hold on, pause. It's like pausing a video game. Okay. I'm calling a timeout is a lot like a timeout in a sport or a game. It's nothing more than pause. Let's step outside this for a second. What's going on? The hand signal is extremely important. Okay. Now, why? It's because when we are emotional, a lot of humans, everyone's different, right? Everyone has a different brain, a different mental package. Like everything is different. Some people, the more emotional they get, the more withdrawn they get, the more they can't hear. Some people, the more emotionally they get, the more they can't talk. Like they clam up. I'm one of those people. I'm the kind of people where I get emotional, I don't yell. I'm the opposite. I get quiet and I get stuck in my head. I'm afraid to say things. Like I don't want to say something that makes this worse. That's my style. I know there's the opposite style with people who will say more, but they're doing it in a way where they don't even realize what they're saying, and they're not listening, and they're making matters worse, right? So there's a hand signal involved for a very specific reason, okay? The hand signal is because sometimes we're not listening. We're not listening to words. We're not processing words. And sometimes we're not speaking our words. I've had moments where I've said timeout in my head, but I never said it out loud. And the other person, they can't read that body language until I do this. And this is, if you get in the habit of doing this, because it doesn't involve words, because you can do it from a distance, you can do it in a crazy, loud, busy room. You could be in the middle of an intersection of a highway and get this from 20 paces. Okay. So this is a great signal because sometimes people's words aren't working, their ears aren't working. Timeout. I also feel like the hand signal is great because it enforces this is like a sport timeout, not a timeout punish you type timeout. Okay. So timeout. We say, I love you or I appreciate you. It took me a while to figure this out, but if you are in the middle of an emotional moment with somebody and you need to talk through the thing, odds are you're probably already too much and you're probably already saying things that one of you regrets. And as soon as you realize it and you're able to finally do this, odds are this is the perfect moment to remind the other person, I love you. I'm on your side. Okay, like I don't want to yell at you. I don't want you yelling at me. I don't want to argue. I want to love you. Like we are on the same team. And I trust you to be responsible. I'm talking to the viewer, sorry, you on the call. I trust you to know when to say I love you and when to say I appreciate you. Clearly, if you're at work and you have to call a timeout on somebody at work, you don't say I love you. You climb timeout. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do for our team. I think we're yelling, and I'm not going to yell. I'm calling a timeout. Can we get 15 minutes and come back and talk about this calmly? Okay. A timeout is not a punishment. It is like a sport. Use the hand signal and throw in the I love you or I appreciate you. So the other person realizes your intentions. My intentions are to work with you, not against you, right? I care about you. When do you call a timeout? So the timeout can be used as a safe word. And that's wonderful. When you realize, holy cow, I'm in the middle of an argument. How did I get here? This is all going off the rails, right? When you realize, let's just say it's bad. So trigger warning. Let's just say someone just punched a hole in the wall. Someone just flipped a table, right? Holy cow, this is a safe word. Timeout. Okay. Safe word. Timeout. I'm not having any part of this. At the same time, even though it can be used as a last resort like that, like a safe word, what if you did the opposite? What if you used it as a first resort? What if the moment you realized your voices were elevated, you called timeout? Imagine where life would be if you did that. So I have a phrase for that. If you check in with yourself and you recognize your emotions, if your emotions are above a 2, you're emotional. You're probably not thinking right. You're probably seeing the world with your rose-colored glasses, with your seeing red, with your sadness, anxiety, whatever it is, you're probably projecting that onto the world in front of you. If your emotions are above a 2, you are not thinking clearly. So call a timeout. Timeout after 2. Watch what happens in your life. If you call a timeout when you're above a 2, you're not going to yell. If you call a timeout when the other person appears to be above a 2, then they're not going to be able to yell. You can stop having arguments. You can stop being involved in yelling debates, misunderstandings. You can call timeout immediately. This is a boundary. We'll talk about boundaries in the future. Boundaries are very important. But as soon as you say, hold on, we're elevated. Our volume is up. I'm at a 4, a 5. My emotions are high. I'm not sure where yours are, but I'm going to call a timeout, at least on myself. I would argue against not calling a timeout on someone else. That's not good. That's basically blame. That's telling it it's their fault. They're the reason why things aren't working. Don't do that. Call timeout on yourself. Hold on. I'm calling a timeout on myself. This is too much for me right now. My emotions are too high. I can't receive the emotions that are coming at me. I'm calling a timeout. I need 15 minutes. I'm going to go take a walk around the block. Like whatever it is that you need to do. Timeout. So I just want to call out very specifically my own personal uh, experience with timeout is that I screwed it up for most of my life, royally. I thought it was a safe word. I thought timeout, you only call it when you're an 8 or a 9. And I was so wrong. When your emotions are an 8 or a 9, odds are you're not going to remember to call timeout. All that logical stuff, it's not happening. You're too emotional. You're caught in fight or flight. So if you are the kind of person who feels like, oh, I'll call a timeout, I'll just not yet. I'll call timeout when I need to. And when I feel like I could talk through this, I feel like I could recover this, I feel like I could de-escalate this, all of that, that's a trap. If you're trying to de-escalate something and it's not working, and things are getting more and more and more, like your patients are getting used up or they're getting more upset, call the timeout now. Call the timeout 5 minutes ago. Don't wait. Don't, as soon as you realize the word timeout in your head, it's probably time to call it. You probably should have called it already. So as soon as you realize it, say it and do the hand motion. Timeout. Hold on. I just realized, holy crap, we're arguing. When did this happen? How did we get here? I love you. Look, pause. Don't try to be like some kind of strong person or someone who's like coming in to de-escalate and blah, blah, blah. Leave that to licensed professionals, right? That is for my friend, the relationship coach, who's a licensed professional who can handle emotions at 8 or 9, right? You don't have to put yourself in that position. Call a timeout right away. What'll happen if you get to an 8 or 9, odds are you'll be so worked up, you will not be thinking straight. You may or may not be able to speak. You may or may not be able to hear, and you will just be making a mess. And maybe the other person is too. And you will absolutely forget to call timeout. A day will go by and you'll go, should have called a timeout, right? Don't put it off. The moment you realize it, call it, and try to call it when it's a 1 or a 2. 1, 2, 3, those are brilliant times to call a timeout. If you got past a 1 or a 2 and you're at a 5, call a timeout. There's no harm, no foul in calling it a little late because you realized it a little late. The issue would be putting it off. Don't put it off. Call it right away. So today's tools that we just talked about, I'm just going to recap real quick here. Talked about from a 1 to a 10. How emotional are you? That is a really great question for a self check-in and for the other person. Like, hold on. I hear that you're upset. On a scale from 1 to 10, how emotional are you right now? I just want to know. I just want to understand and make sure I'm receiving you with the intensity that you need. Sometimes people are upset and we recognize they're upset, but we don't let them know that we heard them. So they come at us with a 6 and we're like, oh, they're upset. And from their point of view, we're treating them like their emotions are a 2. And that just might get them more frustrated. So just get on the same page with them. Hold on. From a scale to 1 to 10, how emotional are you right now? Oh, you're a 6. Okay, cool. Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to put my stuff down and I'm going to treat this as a 6. So I'm going to start with a timeout. Let me go ahead to the next tool. I'm going to start with saying, timeout. I love you. I see you're upset. How about we take a small break, 15 minutes, walk around the block, whatever you need to do, and then we talk. Because I want to give you the respect you deserve. Also, I can see your emotions are a 6. You just confirmed it for me. How about we take a breather and I receive you completely. I purposely give you 100% of my attention. When you tell people, I'm receiving you, I'm hearing you, I'm getting into active listening. We'll talk about that later. When you start to really let people know, I hear you, I understand you, you're valuable to me, their emotions will start to drop. It's amazing about on a scale from 1 to 10, how emotional are you? Sometimes as soon as you say the number, your emotions start to drop. And I'm not trying to get you to not feel. I'm not trying to tell you, have that other person, time out, you're yelling, we're never going to talk while you're yelling. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, oh, you're emotional and I'm going to recognize it. I'm emotional. I'm going to recognize it. Let's treat our emotions with respect. Emotions are real. Okay. As two emotional creatures who have emotions first and think second, how can we handle ourselves here so we can lower our emotions a little bit and then have a good conversation that's going to help us both and strengthen our relationship? And part of that is going to be getting a breather, getting away from each other. In my next week's meeting, we'll talk about actual tools for soothing, for getting your emotions to drop a little bit. But for now, first thing you do is call a timeout. And you could always have this conversation tomorrow or next week or whatever. But let's not damage our relationship by yelling at each other. Let's recognize we care about each other. Time out, I love you. Time out, I appreciate you. So the tools today, on a scale from 1 to 10, where are your emotions at? For yourself and for someone else, time out, I love you, or time out, I appreciate you. Also say why. It's really, really helpful to just really sink it in. Hey, I appreciate you. I'm so glad you're on my team. I know we're not agreeing at this moment. Time out. Let's talk about this in 15 minutes because I care about you and I care about where you're coming from. Time out after 2. Always call it as soon as possible. Don't wait. You can use timeout as a safe word, but don't get in the habit. Try to use it as soon as possible. As soon as you realize I'm in an argument, my emotions are elevated, their emotions are elevated, timeout. So, okay. So today I'm not going to put anyone in the hot seat. Instead, I would like you to close your eyes. So everyone, just close your eyes for a second and just listen to my voice for a second. I'd like you to imagine that big thorn in your relationship that you mentioned earlier in the chat, okay? It's a big thorn in your relationship and it's making things very difficult. Imagine talking to this person Imagine this big thorn coming up. And imagine yourself saying, hold on, time out. I love you. I'm going to be silent just for like 10 seconds to let you do that in your own words, in your own imagination. They're coming at you with this big thorn, or you're coming at them, and you're going to say, time out. I love you. And whatever you need to say to put it on pause for a second so you can both calm down. So I'm gonna stop talking for 10 seconds. Keep your eyes closed. Now I want you to think about those little thorns. Pick the smaller of the two. And I want you to imagine going to the same person. And with this little thorn, where are your emotions at? Can you be in a spot where your emotions are below a two? Like let's say this little thorn has you upset and it's now the next day. You've got a chance to cool down. So you've got this little thorn with this person, and the thorn comes up, and you say, hold on, time out. I love you. This little thing is bothering me. And I'd like to talk about it if we can both be calm about it. Imagine that in your own words. Time out. This is a little thing, but I want to talk about it. When can we talk about it? When can we both be calm? 10 seconds. Keep your eyes closed. Take that one more step. You're having this conversation. You've called a timeout on this little thing. It's not a big deal. Both of you realize it's a little thing. Both of you want to talk about it, and both of you have agreed to talk about it when you're calm. Your emotions are less than a two. There are two or less. Their emotions are a two or less. And now imagine the two of you just talking right through it, just easily coming up with solutions. They've got ideas. You've got ideas. You're both smiling. This is just a little thing. And since you're both calm, it's so easy to talk about it. So easy. Okay. Now start to come back a little bit. Put this down. Open your eyes. How did that go for you? Okay. One of the things we need to start doing, and I'm going to have a lesson on it. One of the things we need to start doing is imagining things going right and setting ourselves up for success. Yelling at another person, having an argument in your mind where you're yelling and you're winning the argument. We always win our arguments in our mind. That's not good practice. That's practicing to yell. That's practicing for conflict. That's practicing to basically unhealthy communication that is going to damage a relationship. What if we could practice healthy ways of communication in our head? What if we can say, okay, the next time this happens, I'm going to call a timeout. Or you know what? This is a small thing, and I think we could talk through it if we were both calm. So I'm going to call a timeout. I'm going to check in with them. I'm going to schedule some time to talk about this when we're both calm. What if? What if you could start practicing things going right instead of worry? Worry is when you're worried about things going wrong, and you practice it so much that what do you know? When you find yourself in that situation, you do what you practiced. You start yelling, right? Or maybe some other mechanism. You could be hiding. You could be fleeing. There's plenty of things that you might do in a situation where you're overwhelmed and you've been practicing overwhelm. Instead, practice the opposite. Practice calling a timeout. Practice things going right. Practice you handling yourself, remaining calm, even though you're emotional and you're allowed to be. Wait a minute. Timeout. I love you. Wow. I can't believe that just came out of my mouth. Practice imagining things going right. Okay. And thanks for taking a moment for doing that with me, because practice I just walked you through is a practice that you can do on your own. And I would highly recommend doing it often. So I'd like to give you a challenge. Um, the call's coming to an end. I'd like to challenge you in the upcoming week. Check in with yourself. Check in for a 1 to 10 on how emotional you are twice a day. However you need to do it. Maybe when you set an alarm. Set an alarm, your phone will go off and you'll do it. Maybe when you are in the car. Let's say you're on the way to work or you're on the way back from work and you're just in traffic and you're bored. I'm going to check in with myself. Where are my emotions at? I'm on my way to work. My emotions are at a 7 already. Maybe like the kids were a little rough this morning. Do I want to walk into work with a 7? Wow. Wow. Maybe I'll just take a timeout in my car. Vice versa. You're on the way home from work and you do a check in the car. Where am I at? Oh, my emotions are a 7. I had a bad day at work. I'm about to walk in my front door and take this out or just dump this on whoever's there. It's not fair. That's not, I love these people. Why would I do that? You know what? I'm going to take a timeout in the car and I'm just going to relax in the driveway, get my head right. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell those people how much I love them. Again, timeout is to put a pause on the situation and then get back to it and then schedule a time. It's not a pause forever. Okay. I challenge you to tell your loved ones about timeout. I love you. The 1 to 10 scale and taking a timeout after 2. Tell them about it. Tell them, wow, that I didn't expect this. Tell them why you might think it might be a good idea. See what they think. Okay. Show them this video if you need to. If you're on the call, I am going to put this a video on the group, on the meetup. Ask if they'd like to try a timeout with you for a week. Like, how about this week we try to call a timeout together? And practice it right there in the moment. Say, so okay, so I'm just practicing timeout. I mean, you're going to say what? Oh, up. I love you. Timeout. I love you. And then you're going to say it back. Timeout. I love you. Okay. And then we're going to, okay. Like whatever it is that you do with your partner, with the people in your life, talk about it. And then try it a couple times this week. And try it on something small. Try it on, oh, timeout. I didn't know we were getting tacos tonight. I thought we were getting like pasta. Something small. Timeout. Oh, okay. Is that what it was? Oh, now I remember. Okay, good. Thank you. And try it on something big. Oh, timeout. We're yelling, and I would love to be able to figure this out with you, but I don't think we're ready yet. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Right? So check in with yourself twice a day, scale of 1 to 10. Tell your loved ones about timeout, I love you, the 1 to 10 scale, and timeout after 2. Ask them if they will spend the next week just trying it out. It's an experiment. It's all an experiment. You could never fail if it's an experiment. All you have to gain is everything. So give it a shot. I just want to give you a reminder that I do coaching. I focus on those aha moments. I do small group coaching where I get a few people together, sort of like this call. And I do one-on-one coaching. One-on-one coaching, the first one's always free. My small group coaching, the first one is always free. In fact, that's what you're doing right now. This is an example of what my small group coaching could look like. In a small group coaching, we would spend more time with each person in the hot seat to let each person talk about what they're currently struggling with and some tools that might help them. And everyone else on the call gets a chance to observe that and learn some tools. So we learn from each other and we learn directly. And I limit my small groups to like 6 to 8 people. So everyone gets a chance if they want. I understand that not everyone likes being in the hot seat, and that's totally good too. For one-on-one coaching, the first one's always free. We're going to figure out what it is you're looking for, what it is I do. If we're a match, talk about some tools, and then we'll move forward from there. If it turns out we're not a match, or if it turns out you're looking for something other than communication coaching, I will point you towards that person if I know that person. So I do coaching. Feel free to look at the meetup. There's a form you can do like for inquiries. You can get in contact with me. My number's on that. Next time, for the rest of October, we're going to be talking about emotional self-mastery, which is that step 1 in the whole healthy conversation. Get your head right. If you'd like to dash ahead, you can always check out the book. My book's on Amazon. It's called Is Now a Good Time to Talk? How to Ask for What You Want and Get It by Danny Burble. My email is dannyburble@gmail.com. Feel free to send me an email if you'd like to get in touch for anything, including coaching. My website is dannyburble.com, and I'm probably going to be moving something more specific to the book at some point here. Also, I have a meetup. It is Safe-Ask Culture Meetup on meetup.com, and I do these Tuesday tools every week, twice on Tuesday. And thanks for coming. Thanks for joining me. Does anyone have any questions? Anything they'd like to add? Hit the chat real quick. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to you guys trying it this week. It's gonna be awesome. Again, practice things going right in your head. The more you practice things going right in your head, the more they will start to go right. It's amazing how that works. It's a topic, we'll talk about it. But yeah, what we look for, we tend to find. And if we're looking for things going right and we're practicing things going right, they're more likely to go right. So don't practice yelling, practice calling a timeout. Cool. All right. I wish you all a great week. I wish you the best in all your relationships. And I can't wait to see you next week.